Welcome to the neighborhood, and thank you for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. Our online series, Highways for Jesus, continues. These past 3 weeks, we've been considering physical highways around Chippenham and perceiving examples that we can apply to the spiritual highways of reaching our communities. Today, the talk is from Chippenham Train Station and ends up in space. These messages relate into our new vision statement, connecting people with Jesus for life and hope and more. We start today with a message from Jesus, who reminds us to trust Him with all our worries and anxieties as we seek to perceive the highways for ourselves and wider community in such strange and different times that we now live in. That's followed by an interesting conversation with Islay, who for many years worked on the railways as far-flung as Hong Kong and has since been building further highways into community for Jesus. Then we have a prayer and a song and the message from Chippenham Railway Station, which will bring our time together to a close today. Let's start moving then with a Bible reading from the Message paraphrase, which is read to us by Corinne.
I'm reading from the Message, Matthew 6, verses 19 to 34. A life of God worship. Don't hoard treasure down here where it gets eaten by moths and corroded by rust, or worse, stolen by burglars. Stockpile treasure in heaven where it's safe from moth and rust and burglars. It's obvious, isn't it? The place where your treasure is the place you will most want to be and end up being. Your eyes are windows into your body. If you open your eyes wide in wonder and belief, your body fills up with light. If you live squinty-eyed in greed and distrust, your body is a dank cellar. If you pull the blinds on your windows, what a dark life you will have. You can't worship two gods at once. Loving one God, you'll end up hating the other. Adoration of one feeds contempt for the other. You can't worship God and money both. If you decide for God, living a life of God worship, it follows that you don't fuss about what's on the table at meal times or whether the clothes in your closet are in fashion. There's far more to your life than the food you put in your stomach, more to your outer appearance than the clothes you hang on your body. Look at the birds, free and unfettered, not tied down to a job description, careless in the care of God. And you count far more to Him than birds. Has anyone by fussing in front of the mirror ever gotten taller by so much as an inch? All this time and money wasted on fashion, do you think it makes that much difference? Instead of looking at the fashions, walk out into the fields and look at the wildflowers. They never primp or shop, but have you ever seen colour and design quite like it? The 10 best dressed men and women in the country look shabby alongside them. If God gives such attention to the appearance of wildflowers, most of which are never even seen, don't you think He'll attend to you, take pride in you, do His best for you? What I'm trying to do here is to get you to relax, to not be so preoccupied with getting, so you can respond to God's giving. People who don't know God and the way He works fuss over these things, but you know God and how He works. Steep your life in God reality, God initiative, God provisions. Don't worry about missing out. You'll find all your everyday human concerns will be met. Give your entire attention to what God is doing right now, and don't get worked up about what may or may not happen tomorrow. God will help you deal with whatever hard things come up when the time comes.
Welcome to the neighborhood, and we are now in Costa Coffee in Chippenham. Where is this place? Which Costa Coffee is this?
It's the one by M&S and Sainsbury's.
The one by M&S and Sainsbury's.
And
there
the
you
new
go.
Aldi.
And the new Aldi, which is just across the road. So you can have your coffee and go shopping at the same time. Anyway, as you can see, I've got Isla with me today. And we're looking at the theme, continuing the theme of directions of travel on the Jesus way. And Isla's got a great story, and I've asked him to share some of it, using that idea of highways and how God leads and guides and changes direction as time goes by. So Isla, thanks for being willing to share and give us a bit of your background.
So
You're welcome to come this way. That's all right.
And I was like coming across with a big shadow and everything.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You carry on.
all the more the merrier. So I start off life as third generation in Camel Shipyard in Birkenhead, and after 13 years I escape shipbuilding, ending 3 generations. So because the cards were on the table for it to close, so I shoot over to Doncaster, over to Yorkshire. Some might say God's own country, and then I enter the railway industry, working on London Underground, and then private owner wagons and carriages. After 3 years, they close, and I'm made redundant, and so I set up my company, and I go to work for Railtrack.
But isn't that a bit scary? You've got a job and then you're suddenly made redundant.
It is, because I took voluntary redundancy from the shipyard, and then it's compulsory redundancy from the railway, and it's like, okay, what's going on here? Because at each occasion we've just had a baby.
Oh my.
So yeah, we'd had Matt. Si was 6 months old, and Matt was just a few months. In fact, no, he wasn't born when I was made redundant in Doncaster. He wasn't born.
Wow.
So he was a month away. So yeah, so it was scary times, and trying to find work in an area that's got huge unemployment because of the mines closing. So I end up at Manchester, working for a new company called Railtrack. They took over from BR, and I'm working now on track and signals and stations and bridges. So working right across the whole spectre of railways. And then I got a phone call. Westinghouse Brakes in Chippenham would like to interview you. Well, I had heard of Westinghouse Brakes because only about a month beforehand I'd been down to do an audit of them. And so that was a bit strange that suddenly that should appear. So off I go, and I end up getting the job. And then on the day we move to Chippenham, my boss rings me up and asks me if he could meet me while I'm off. And he says, I want you to take over this other role. So I took it on, but after about 15 months things weren't panning out, and as a result of boardroom disagreements I was made redundant again. So just before Christmas. And that day there was a job in the Telegraph paper for some work in Hong Kong. So I applied for that, and January 97 takes me to Hong Kong, leaving Jill and the boys behind. They go off to Spring Harvest with surrogate dads from Sheldon Road, and then they join me in Hong Kong to start a new life.
So how did Jill feel about a new life in an Oriental world?
And she'd never even seen Hong Kong. She'd never been to Hong Kong.
Wow.
I'd been flying out for Westinghouse to do some work in Hong Kong at the airport, so I had a bit of an idea. But yeah, it was a huge culture shock even for me to move to live. So I found us some accommodation, found us a house, we didn't have emails to that extent. So it was a case of having to buy a camera and take some photos and send them back. This is where we're going to live, love.
What about church?
Church, so on a Sunday, the South China Morning Post has all the church services taking place in Cantonese and English. So you can just say to the taxi driver, I want to go to that church. So I did a bit of touring, and yes, I did go to the Methodist Church on the island, and that was a bit too high for me. And so I thought, well, what about this one over by where we're going to live and by where I work? So I went to Shartin Church on Fire, and that was the Kowloon Anglican church's church plant. We met in a government school. They had a vicar, but they called him the pastor, and he lived in a government house. So, and we went into cell groups, and during the period that we were there, we were almost coached, trained to go underground if we needed to, because come handover, no one knew what was going to happen. Yeah. We didn't know if we were going to have church. We didn't know if Stephen was going to have a house. And so, Stephen being the pastor, so we were all set to go underground if we needed to.
Wow.
But despite what we watched on the telly, which I'm sure most of you saw, the pouring rain, watching the PLA coming over the border, very hard-faced, all standing to attention, no coats on them, and it's absolutely teeming down. And but thankfully, church was still open on Sunday in the school, and that was one celebration service. But we were
fantastic.
We were still wary of what was going on.
So you're in Hong Kong, and you're learning and you're adapting, and you're in a massive challenge as a church. And then something else happens, your highway changes again.
So yeah, it does. Jill's dad took ill first, and then my dad, and so they were in the same hospital. So Jill and I were flying back a week apart to see them, and then when on one of Jill's return flights when things weren't looking so good, I went into work the next day and said, we're going to come home July when the kids have broken up from school. And so work arranged for some interviews. One was at Islay. I didn't get that job, but I came back and was based in Birmingham looking after the East Coast Railway, the Class 91s and the Mark 4s. Sad that I can still remember all my vehicles. And so I ran with that for about 9 months, and then my dad took ill and passed away as well. So I had a change again. I dropped out while I recollected myself. And then work came and said, actually, could you do some work for us? And so I carried on working for them, but as a consultant. And then they asked me to look after Hong Kong, working out of Islay. And I then commuted to Hong Kong for about 8 years.
And so you took that over, and then things changed again for you, because you ended up, evidently, as we can see now, in Chippenham.
We came back to Chippenham from Hong Kong because we still had our house. We had rented that out, so yeah. So
and
we
you're
came
at
back.
Sheldon Road, is that right?
That's right.
And then there's some big changes at Sheldon Road, massive
so
changes.
There are. So work had dried up again, and Sheldon Road are looking at this thing called a beacon centre and this beacon project, and they were looking at how they were going to serve the community.
So that beacon centre then was like a highway into community. How could this be a community project?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
So leadership were meeting on the Wednesday, and I was asked as a result of that if I would look at heading up the Christians Against Poverty Debt Counselling Project, which I end up running for the next 9 years.
Wow. Then, last one, another highway opens up.
Another highway opens up.
So how can you tell when God's opening up new highways, or whether you should stick for year 10 at CAP, for example?
Well, yeah, I with Matt passing away, our youngest son, there was a time when I thought, can I carry everybody else as well? All my clients. It was very traumatic, and it was very hard. And you're carrying their baggage as well.
Yeah.
And so from that, I thought, is it now time for green pastures and time to move on? And the Fairways, the Methodist home in Chippenham, was looking for another chaplain, and I just thought, was that right for me? And I did some enquiring around of a few folks, and Jill wasn't so sure. Let's be honest, Jill didn't think that was a job for me.
Okay.
But others did, and so I thought, well, let's put my application in it. It's an email, so it's not even the cost of a stamp anymore. And so I did, and I went off to Cliff College a couple of hours later for a weekend on mental health that Methodist Church was running. And that signposted me in a number of different directions, and thought, you know, maybe there's something about this. And then the Reverend David Von Berg, who was the chaplain at Fairways, came to the local preachers meeting to talk about chaplaincy.
Okay.
And I'm taking copious notes. And Richard Adicott sat next to me. I was the driver this week. And he said to me afterwards in the car, he said, "Gosh, you took a lot of notes." I said, "Oh, I'm really interested in mental health and dementia, and my mother had suffered with it." And then the next day I get an invite for an interview. I get the job. And so for the last 4 years I've been the chaplain there. And then in October last year I took on the additional role of area support chaplain.
For us folk that aren't used to that amount of change, what would be your number one tip if you've got one? Or two? What do you
three.
think? Yeah, okay.
I think it's to be honest with yourself, and to really have an inside look at yourself, and try and look at yourself as others see you. And then from that, build up a picture of where you could see yourself going. You know what, I can remember at school, where do you think you'll be in 5 years? Well, okay, I guess that was a bit destined, because that was likely to be the shipyard.
Yeah.
But if you'd have said to me, where were you going to be in 30, 40 years, there's no way in a month of Sundays I'd have ever thought I'd worked around the world. No way, no way. And that was all set, I believe, at our doorstep by God. And there was a chorus we used to sing, "Here I am, Lord." And I couldn't sing that. I couldn't sing the words, because every time I sang that in church, I would be moving on. And so I stopped singing it. Whenever it came up, I stopped singing the words, because I was frightened that I was going to be moved again. But we're settled. We're settled.
Do you think in those that if you had said no, you'd have missed out actually, because you wouldn't have actually been around the world, you wouldn't have done any of those things, would you?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's no way we'd have done any of it. And so if I had have said no, we wouldn't be where we are today.
So that you had to take it, you had to be brave,
Yeah.
you had to be courageous, and you had to have faith enough that actually God's got your back.
Yes, yeah. And knowing that when we went to Hong Kong, we had a support network back here at Sheldon Road as well.
Okay.
That was very important to us, and that's why we came back to Chippenham to Sheldon Road.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing with us today. That's a story that could go on for hours. It's brilliant, and I hope that's encouraged people today. And I'm sure if they bump into you somewhere or other and they want to ask you some questions, you'd be happy to do that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. God bless you and your ministry and your family.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Okay, well, let's move on and for our next part of our time together today. God bless.
We now come to our prayers, where in this instance we're going to give thanks and count our blessings. Loving God, we thank you for the countless blessings we have received, the innumerable good things that surround us every moment of each day. So much beauty, variety, and interest to inspire and instruct us. Loving God, for all you have given, receive our praise. We thank you for everything you have given to us through Jesus Christ, for everything we see of you through him, your great love constantly reaching out to us, your care and compassion that never ceases, your mercy that is never exhausted, your eternal purpose which slowly but surely is coming to fulfillment. Loving God, for all you have given, receive our praise. Loving God, forgive us that we are so rarely content, that we fail to appreciate how fortunate we are, that we lose sight of what we have through dwelling on what we might have had. Loving God, for all you have given, receive our praise. Teach us to count our blessings, to recognize all that is good around us, to be truly content in all circumstances, to realize that your love will never fail us and your grace will be sufficient for all our needs. Loving God, for all you have given, receive our praise. In the name of Christ, Amen.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved.
How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed.
Through many dangers, toils and snares, I have already come. 'Twas grace that brought me safe this far, and grace will lead me home. When leaving there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we know there's days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Oh, we know there's days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
I'm now at Chippenham Train Station, and we've got a train just coming in actually, but I don't know whether you're going to see it. Oh yeah, you can, just a little bit. Fantastic. What timing. Thank you, GWR. God's great. God's Wonderful Railway. Yeah, that's it. Okay, let's get back on track. I got distracted by the train coming in the station there. Fantastic. There are more digital highways than we've touched on already. And I just want to give you a flavour of another one. And the other one is this. This summer, in the evenings, in the night, I've been looking up into the stars. And I've noticed satellites. They're brighter than stars. They go in a single direction and they go quite fast. And it reminded me how connected we are into that superhighway as well. We've got sat-navs, we've got our phones, we've got all sorts of other communications. And over these past year and more, our Christian lives have often been lived across digital highways, which often has meant that we've been going up to the satellites and then beaming down again. Incredible highways. The digital highways become so important to us as a worshipping community. The website, for example, is a front door into the life of the church. Also, the videos. And how many people have been saying, oh, I passed on the video message to my friend who needed some encouragement, that sort of thing. People can stay connected through this highway, and it needs to keep developing. It's not going to go away. In all the messiness of creating highways into community for the work of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. We need to keep looking up, staying connected with our Heavenly Father, because that's where we need to be primarily connected in with. Confidence in comes through connected to Jesus. Our bravery, our energy, our resource comes through our knowledge and confidence in Him. 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 says, God does not give me a spirit of fear, but of power and strength and self-control. Therefore, in these continually uncertain times, we do not need to fear and fret, worry if we're in a building or out of a building, because we have the Holy Spirit in our lives, and we are enabled to live the Jesus way wherever we are. And as a Jesus community, we have found so many new highways to explore into community, and there's much more to be done. We, when we have the Spirit in us, are enabled to speak with grace, with kind words, to be patient, unhurried, generous, forgiving, hope carriers. Do we perceive that in our own lives? We know that God is always with us and is always opening up new highways into community. We know that He will encourage us forward, even in these challenging times. We can't be sure what the winter's going to hold, but we can be sure that He is with us, and we continue to live on, creating highways into community, connecting with one another. We experiment, we plan, we implement, we adapt, and we do that process over again. Experiment, plan, implement, adapt. It's a process all of society needs to get involved with, and is doing in many ways. Businesses, schools, shops, medical practices, and not least the Christians. We Jesus followers are involved in building the future, laying the foundations, making the pathway straight for the good news of Jesus. We're in it together because that's the way Jesus wants it. Some takeaway points. Don't you love highways, railways? Marvellous. It took so much planning to get them to come at that time. Conclusion. You're glad to hear. Right now, our main role is to rebuild relationships, rebuild into community. And in church, we're going to, on services on a Sunday, for example, we're going to do services around tables, because we need to reconnect. Lots of other things being done to reconnect, to build bridges, to build highways into the community once again. Even better is when we organise it ourselves. Invite a friend for a cup of coffee, those sort of things. Rebuilding relationships. You don't need it planned for you. And some of these things are small. They're small changes, but they're all important. You might remember a talk some time ago now on Zechariah chapter 4 verse 10, which says, do not despise the day of small things. Don't despise your small changes, because they add up. Have you perceived the new highways that are underway? Really spend some time reflecting on that and the changes that you have made personally. And last of all, I have been amazed, truly amazed, at a new superhighway that is just starting, and that is space travel. I can't believe it, but I suspect that my children, and certainly any grandchildren to come from me, they will just think it's normal. Space travel. Wow. Imagine going into space. I fancy doing that. How about you? Even better, into space for Jesus. There's a lot in today, a lot to think through and digest. And we'll keep reflecting on this as time goes by. But may we be blessed because we know that Jesus is with us. He goes ahead of us. And what we have to do is join in. Have a blessed week. May God be with you and your families. May you be encouraged in faith. Amen.
Thank you for your company, and we're really pleased you joined us today. For those of you on YouTube, then we'd like it if you could subscribe to our channel. There's no cost, but you'll get notifications of the latest video if you also click the bell symbol. You can also click the thumbs up button if you enjoyed the video.